The topic is the interdependent cosmos, and the panelists will come up with more insights. So, anybody who wants to start?
I'm going to start out like a monk. You told me that through meditation, monks had thought of other worlds, other planets, the nature of the universe. Why do scientists have to look for these things? And yet, the other day in my class, monks were looking through microscopes. And the Tibetan monks asked the exact same question that the Christian monks asked Galileo in the mid-1600s when he had them look through the telescope to show them the moons of Jupiter. And they asked, how do I know that what I'm seeing when I look through this tube is not created by the tube, that it actually is something that's there? And so what we do in science is to look at the thing many different ways, and we hope that by looking in many different ways we get closer to an understanding of what's actually there. We use multiple telescopes, and for the moons of Jupiter we went there, so that gets at the information. But scientists then can take the idea that you get at what the truth is, or closer to the truth, closer to what's really there, by doing multiple views. Take the ideas from the monks, the philosophical ideas about what's out there, and then do other views. Look at them in the scientific way to see how what we discover corresponds to what the thinking was.
This will be very strongly challenged. Because according to the Buddhist viewpoint, everything is designated by your mind. So therefore the problem with your scientific way of seeing things is you are saying that we'll find something objective. So is it possible to find something objective without letting your mind color the thing that you see? For example, I call this white. When did it become white? Somebody in the beginning said this is white, so everybody is now parroting and saying white, white. If somebody said right in the beginning this is black, today everybody will be saying this is black. So how will you ensure that without your monkey mind playing the trick, you can get that objective view? Like for example, there's so much dependence on mathematics, and we say mathematics is the language of science. And everybody says 2 plus 2 is 4. 2 plus 2, maybe 3, maybe 5. There are a lot of thinkings, ideas going on there. So my main question is, how will you, even from the scientific community, now you are talking about the law of uncertainty, you see. So therefore, are you still with this group of uncertainty, or are you still thinking that just by using these instruments you can be totally objective?
So I was trying to anticipate that question and say, approaching the truth, approaching the objective reality by looking at it in many different ways, and never at perhaps achieving it. And the museum I come from is a museum of science and art and human perception. And many scientists never touch on this part, which is human perception, understanding how our view of the world actually is created in the brain. And it can have illusions, it can be wrong. And in order to understand how close we are to appreciating the actuality, the objectivity, we have to understand how the brain works and how it goes astray. And that's why consciousness, as we've looked at the other day, is so important to a scientist. And yet many scientists aren't schooled in the necessity for understanding how the brain creates illusions. And I think that's very important. but we get at an approach, a closer and closer approach by doing multiple experiments.
You see, science works with third person's perspective. Guru and the Shishya, disciple and the monk, they work in the second person's perspective, and the experience is first person's perspective. Now, even which is not brought at the level of the third person's perspective, the guru can discuss it with the disciple in second person's perspective, because there is intersubjective agreement between several monks, and then it is found, okay, it is right. So this could be in the way the spirituality is going on. But at the highest level, even guru pushes the disciple to that, you have to experience it, I cannot deliver it to you. So that comes the first person's experience. So at the highest level, the subjective experience remains. But he becomes guru when he can communicate it, at least communicate it, that there is such an experience to his disciple. Now the disciples then again it descends, and it comes to the third person's perspective, and it becomes scientist. It becomes a science. Everybody's property.
So you are with us and not with the science anymore.
다 좋아도 다 삼서서 되게 좋아. 된자도 드네 다 공기 천에 다 드네 근조니 보다 감님이나 제나나 대타메 반도지 콩송도 공기 다 감제나나 천에 바다 근조니가 대초노지 송도와 어떤 연자도 대 지남니 감제나나 대초위기 중세제 감 제나나 대모초 중세 사이키지나로 지스켜.
So, by listening to your presentation and also listening to Paul's response, it seems that from your point of view, both God and science can fit into one box, and according to you, they sit in separate boxes. So, can each of you tell one reason why you think that it should have two separate boxes, and why you should think that it can fit in one box?
No, the box will disappear.
The boxes are like there's a kind of performance in Western culture called a mime, and this is a performer that performs without words. And one classic performance is to pretend that the mime is inside a box. And the mime conveys the presence of the box to you through his motions, and yet there isn't really a box. It's a box not in the mind, but in the mime. But these two boxes can have various amounts of overlap. In other words, a scientist, when dealing inside the scientific box of experiments, probably uses some of the ethics that comes from the box of philosophy and religion. Yet, some others might deal with two separate boxes. So I think I'll allow my boxes to overlap.
This reminds me a story. Once a teacher asked his little children to paint something, a tiger, a mouse, and a cat. Then everybody painted it, and then there was a little girl who did not paint anything. When the teacher wanted to see the painting, she just came with a blank paper. Said, "Where is your painting?" Then the little girl said, "Sir, I painted everything, but the mouse eat the rat, the rat was eaten by the mouse was eaten by the tiger went into the forest." So is this your answer?
나중에 시험도 최선지 대중이 걸어 시험으로 도시에 다단다 얘기 되어디 아니 대중도 저요도 다단다 배시나 지금 그거 되게다 곧 되게 제로와 곧 되게다 콩나 인디 되어디 아니 레버기 쇼예 총나 나자포네 아니 수고 요마초 차장 비즈미게 차지로와 딜라 아니 남베기 라마도 이나레 다 힌두기 이나레 다 대가는 신 예수기 라마도 저기 아니 콜라가노레 블레스도 치니 안디 네발리 겹투그레스 디지티에.
So when we have some brain damages, we can have paralysis in the body. For example, like if you have damage in the right hemisphere of the brain, then you can have paralysis in the left side of the body. And if you are somebody who believes in the God, then what happens to the role of God at that kind of situation? And can God, through blessing, make that patient recover from his paralysis?
If I would have some remedy on that, I would have been flooded with these all paralyzed patients to me. So I do not have any remedy for that. Let me say so first. But if you want an explanation, you say even if the God's grace is coming, the neurons are not ready or the neurons are damaged, and that's why it cannot translate this force which is coming from above. Even if you so the infrastructure is very important, and infrastructure is the brain. The 10 to the power 11 neurons which have gathered here on our head to form the brain, it is extremely important. And it has been done in another experiment. They have lost the power of multiplication. It's the neurons usually do not multiply. The most sophisticated neuron of the cerebral cortex, they do not multiply. Multiplication is cellular sex. So they have abundant sex. In abandoning sex, they have gone to the highest level of consciousness. Now, this has a materialistic explanation also, because whenever a cell divides, a mitotic spindle is formed. And this, during mitosis, the mitotic spindle is formed, and this is formed from the microtubules. Here comes this hammer of Penrose theory. The microtubules are very important. And in neurons, the microtubules are preserved because they do not undergo mitosis. So they are at the best stage, best phase to concentrate the informations, which the other cells do not have. Other cells, the microtubule spindle break down, they proliferate, they say. That is a problem with the neurons. You see, once it is paralyzed, you cannot replace it by another neuron. So people have been trying to do the neural transplant there, put another neuron. This is a regenerative medicine. They are trying that, okay, if my brain neuron does not function, let me put another live neuron in the brain. So science has been progressing in that way, what we can do. So don't depend on God. All the science has what the science has been invented or inventing, they are also God's invention. You see, the scientist mind is also worked by God. So it is all God's invention to take medicine, accept the procedure of transplant surgery, neurotransplantation. These are all essential to treat the paralyzed patients.
Let me ask a question on this very topic, the interdependent cosmos. Once I heard somebody saying that if the butterfly flaps its wings here in this part of the world, it will have its effect in the furthest corner of the other side of the world. This is a very important question to me, because I clearly understand that while we are living together or when we interact with something close by, then definitely there is a sense of interdependence. But when you talk about the butterfly flapping its wings here and having its effect on the other side of the world, that I think is a very intriguing and very important question. Even in the case of the Buddhist practice, if I practice my compassion here for the benefit of all sentient beings, is it really going to help everybody or not? I think these are kind of related questions, so I would like to hear your scientific viewpoints.
Okay. So this is in science what we call chaos theory. And chaos theory in science involves something called sensitivity to initial conditions. If you have a ball on the top of a mountain, very smooth mountain, then the slightest offset in the position of that ball will cause it to roll down an entirely different side of the mountain. So maybe the little bit of wind that comes from the flapping of that butterfly wing in the sensitive scientific system that is the atmosphere and the weather can actually trigger a cascading motion that leads to a hurricane in the other hemisphere of the Earth. And that's where this question first came from. And I think I'd like to turn it to Saket to tell some of the stories about how the solar system itself, talking about the interdependent cosmos, how this harmony that he talked about in the original talk can be disrupted by this chaos effect.
And this, in a broader sense, this interdependence dialogue may not be answered because in a very intriguing way, in the sense that whatever we are getting new knowledges or existing knowledges, that is integrating our picture of the cosmos in some sense. And you said, well, sir, it may not be true from your practice and your philosophy what science is looking. But on a God point size, there are variety of scientists, and strongly it's a part of debate. It has not resolved yet in this century, who believes in God and who don't believe in God. But all of them are working towards the common goal for finding new things or for the welfare of society. Putting in chaotic way, I don't have that much expertise in chaos theory, but I'll say there are fields, especially in nonlinear dynamics, where things are being studied which are not responding according to their action. But in nature, as we understand and as we are discussing here on this common platform, everything should be in equilibrium or it should be interdependent, but there are things which have not understood well. Areas are progressing, which science is doing. So on this note, I can only add this thing.
This has been tried to explain by the quantum entanglement. This has been also tried to be explained by information entanglement. Now, a lot of works by Rupert Sheldrake, experimental work, there is no explanation. He says it morphogenetic field theory. So if you sing a song here, and this song, singing this song become far more easier in thousands of miles away. So there is a morphogenetic field theory. As you say, that compassion, if I practice compassion here, it spreads. So it does not have any theoretical explanation now, but it has practical demonstration by Rupert Sheldrake. He is an experimentalist, and he has a lot of experiments on that. But there is no theory to explain it yet. It's from the other side. There are many theories, but there is no experiment, and Sheldrake has experiments, but which does not have theoretical explanation. And this is more, one must read the Sheldrake's work in this context.
I was, with your response, it came into my mind that we can come up with an interesting collaboration, scientific and Buddhist collaboration of my meditating on compassion, and I request you to use your instrument and channel that energy of compassion and let the other person feel it, like the songs that are channeled through the wireless or with wire or whatever. So probably maybe interesting area to explore.
When Buddha was there was no telephone, there was no wireless, nothing. Seeing a person, he can get all the information out of him, and he can give all information of his to him. But now we do it by the telephone.
So it is exactly at this point from the public there is a caution. Scientists these days are doing experiments and finding new theories that are already mentioned in Buddha's text. If meditation helps us to gain the knowledge of the universe, don't you think that we should spend more time on meditation instead of making up new things by using our natural resources?
It depends on attitudinal disposition of yours. What is your attitudinal disposition? You want to be monk, you will discover the same thing which the scientist. If you have scientific disposition in your attitude, you become a scientist. There is no bar. Even if without becoming scientist or spiritualist, you can become a humanist. You just serve people and you will achieve the same thing. The science, humanity and the spirit meets at one point. You have to take in which way you are disposed of.
And the whole scientific community in any areas of sciences is not only exploring for the new knowledge. We are all the community also trying to understand what is happening because of our human interference to our Mother Earth, and how we can save our society and for the healthy life and welfare for the humanity. So not only adding new knowledge is important, but whatever we are having, how we can utilize in a proper way so that humanity can progress well. But it is a really big thing which I can't discuss in a smallest limited brain understanding, that scientists really should be well connected with this philosophical discourse, because science may progress, but the dimension of progress and radially outward is not well predicted and well known whether it will really affect our society in a positive way or in a negative way. But if they are following Buddha practices or any other practices, so it may be possible that we may not land up with destructive mode of scientific outcomes, and it will help a lot.
Okay, I'm a scientist. Theories must be tested by experiment. And so the theories that we hear from the Buddhists and the theories like we hear from the scientists, string theory, they are there as theories, but they become science when they're tested. And so this is our two boxes overlapping.
다행히 삼주지 시조지. 다 갈로래. ngarangi dosta endu zambala la sing de chilo la mewaji ani yagargi kechana kharasa bhagwan insan ke roop mein hote lai chido de doji la sing de susugi nalo le yawa doji chorg dos kachinda de zambala susugi jawa khang yago chena digi tumde yago yawa chida jawa nyemba chena di tumde nyemba yawa chire de zambala ani la sing de susu nalo le yede wa chigres 대가는 신이다 수수기 퍼점밀라 야고지 지나 안 퍼저기 조절에 야고 쳐야지 임바지 다디 수정이 뭐 돈이래스 다 수매기 돈이 달라든데 데다미데 지금 데절은 먼저 파쳐봐피나 수정 오버기 조로고 지원하는 신 대가는 신 수매기 안데 저기 조로고 지도 그래스 근데 지금 섬기도 도치데 사생인데 치료나 많이 받지 아니 수수 나로를 여바지 레샤 또 섬기도 쉬이
A personal opinion related with God. So personally I believe that when we talk about God or God at any level, it's not outside of your physical body, and I believe that God is something that is inside your body, and whatever the positive things that you believe is coming from the God, it comes from within yourself, and also any negative things that is coming from what you believe is some lower form of God is also because of your wrong action and wrong thought, and it's also coming from yourself and not from something or somebody who is outside of your body.
I have a question at this point. Buddha, Nagarjuna, and many Prasangika Madhyamikas, they philosophically made a very precise conclusion by saying that there is no partyless particle, no partyless particle. I was informed that at least some time ago, scientists were trying to find a partyless particle because they wanted to say, look, I found it. This is the fundamental building block. That they wanted to say. Now I do hear, I am not so sure, wave-particle duality, things like that. So my curiosity is, are you still trying to find this partyless particle, or have you joined Nagarjuna and Buddha?
Yes. So we'd put this in the following terms. Is there any particle which cannot be divided into smaller parts? It's a partless particle. And so scientists are studying many particles, and we do this by colliding them to see what happens in the collision, figuring that if they have parts, the collision might split them into those parts. And we have looked at a particle called an electron, and we collide two electrons together. And up to the limits that we've studied electrons, which is about 10 to the minus 20th meters, that's about 0.19 zeros and a 1 meter. That's a very small thing. That electron has no parts yet. So I can't say, oh, it's always going to have no parts. And we've done the same thing with another particle called the quark. We collide those, and up to now, we haven't found parts, but some scientists hypothesize they have parts. However, there is this particle called a photon, and a photon is, quote, a particle of light. And this particle of light has a wave nature as well. And we use this word particle in a new way from how you might use it. We don't picture that the particle has, the photon has a solid edge like that. But here's the deal. That photon is always created in its entirety. All of its energy is there when it's created. And when it goes away, all that energy goes away. So the sense of it being a particle is an all or nothing creation and destruction. And for a photon, that is true. It has no parts. You can't interact with half a photon. It's all or it's nothing. So I think that's as close as I can come to the partless particle.
당하랑게 삼선로제나 드니 다다 팀종세한로데 베마세바 키치모노지 samdegido tene yanzada timjong ge korte tatta kunamba ki ma duthi thashun rawo ji ge thone ma songhin rawri ma to yang ji se nepje di tena nangju ji simji te thone go wa dang te so je ge le simji je le ti ne so go ya te so ko la sakhin rawo je da donang ro hira ji mundu samsan ro jang arang ten so ro tene yanzada nga chu gi 다다 세례바기 답답지당 심조 대소대 시야대 조조 다치 로아 매당 다 심지 소대는 제 대탑당 무 네서티 또비기 탑도 다 고속 답진로 또 제기 요소 여러 드네 연자데 다 템델당 드네 찬냠세야 대소 드네 두티 대소양 차마냥 바연 소야나 드네 맞아 상구 응구조 제한다고 다 된대제네 용여러 내가 난인게 심지양 제기제를 띠네 제제를 만퇴발을 띠네 다 선바마 제반다고 다 다나게 다 소리 다 차당 대소양 차마냥 좀 쓸 때는 자가 여러 드네 인자들 코남바기 전에바 대소게 소야때 서로 그 죽기 이제 제 응보 대소를 짱짱 십산다고 제네 tene ma shesa la ngoto cheba yana tende no changja ri ma to pa nang simji te so che ge le tu de wa che ta che ge le chanyam zo go ya che ta tene thundra zo go ya ro tende shiran ro che mi shi ban ro chin thong de do tende yan za de te so yang sen nu zu king ge tu sa tun jo ta jo kan ro thu yu mi nang yin ge tene nga so simji ro te ya che ge le ting go wa che ta chanyam go wa che ta tene te so yang tene thundre seate tene jongayena deje seate jongo yoro tate koron jumde no chade yoro tene yenza tan thundre seate se duthi khaki je thundre thoba chamje deje no te tron tho yo maro so te simjing te so ge sim samo te thundre go yoro te so re tho go yoro te le tene deje tho yor ma to ba ta 뱀비 그 죽지 정오 카시지 들어와 잠제 낭기 가서 가르세 거로 대체라고 뜻은 도요 말어 감디디 가서 대체세야테 소와 요조 제일히 고요르 마토바 소와 메조 제일 거랑게 대체세야테 용어야 메가로 대인도 갑설티 튼데 tunde se ya ti gi ju gi ti gi thola tene zo kare de go ate ngo ma sahi sene ba che go ate pe ki chi mo do che ngara tene thong do wa
brief comment or thought. So when you talk about the harmony and the equilibrium and the dependent cosmos, and it seems that from the scientific point of view or the scientific community, they are paying more attention towards the harmony or the nature of physical elements or the physical object at the objective level. But you also said that the reason why you do scientific experiments is for the common good of the humanity. So if your purpose is to benefit human being and the human community and also for the other sentient beings, then I think that you should pay equal kind of weightage and equal kind of interest in knowing about the equilibrium, not only in the physical level, but also in the non-physical or subjective level. So when you are practically paying more attention towards the physical equilibrium and not much about the subjective equilibrium, and you're also saying that what we do is for the common good of all the living beings. I see this kind of a little bit of contradictory, and so I hope that scientific communities pay much more attention toward the nature of subjectivity or the subjective level or the sentient beings who are living within this cosmos. And when we talk about the cosmology, when we talk about the harmony and the happiness, happiness is relevant only for the sentient beings, not about the physical things. So that's why I think that is important, and he's continued this.
다 나라서 낭비기 원이나 되니 다 zukutusa 자오지 되니 다 같은 제모도지 아무나 팀이 보도지 샤사지요로라 되니 산지 좀 된데 신이 차요리 다 그런서 체력비 원이 되니 또 맞지고도 알아 다디 갤러리 라인 샤기인담 아무나 딜리 로스비 또 맞지요다 메스레라 되니 다니 갤러리데 마샤와이나 되니 그런서기 수지 갈라니에요 말했어 사망 알아서 냠용기 돈이 Dini de Shija de Gandagaina, the Gotok Jigo, Resungdola. That Dini de Usula, Nisama and Lama maybe Lomada, Dini Gigin maybe didn't get to Samares, Suchikala Manimana, Dini does child drosseres, Cherasugi.
He was saying that in the case of in Buddhism or Buddhist followers, there is one particular teacher who is the source, the Buddha. So in the case of the science, who is your teacher? And one of the possible teachers, like Galileo, himself clearly said that you need to individually experiment, don't listen to anybody. If nobody listens to anybody, how would you find that authenticity? You see, everybody will come up and show up with their random findings, and there will be no lineage, no transmission, no authenticity, no systematic procedure. So, you have any particular teacher?
It may not sound appropriate, but I feel teacher for scientific community or for all researcher or who's a part of involved in the part of study is a nature. And we are students, we are experimenting with nature and learning. In this learning process, we are not completely sure that whether it's really going to benefit. But our objective is this. We want some good thing for society, maybe for direct benefit or some new knowledge. But this type of intellectual discussion or discourse is very much essential to make our understanding much more coherent and focused, in a sense that whatever we are learning from nature, from scientific point of view, using gadgets, machines, which may not be happier for, you said like that, why we need that, but they can add very important part very important information. So I feel all the scientists are learning and discussing among themselves and reaching on common goal, whether it's really accepting or not accepting theory, whether it will work very well or not work very well. So teacher, in a sense that I believe nature is our teacher.
I'll conclude with one quotation from one very famous Tibetan teacher, Gintu Chumpel, who in one of his compositions says, "The legless earthworm moves in search of peace, the eyeless ant moves in search of peace. In short, the whole world is running in search of peace. Let us also run in search of our lunch." So I stop here. Thank you very much.